Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another amazing episode of Rabbi Winston's Redemption Thursdays. Rabbi Pinchas Winston from Tellstone, Israel. I think he introduces himself better than I introduce him. It was very fun last week to listen to your introduction. He took time out of his busy schedule to be with us tonight, and I really appreciate that. And we're looking forward to hearing about the what we really need to do, the final ingredient, and learning about how we get to the Geula and the redemption process. And please don't forget to check out Rabbi's new website, www.sharnunproductions.org. You can see that under his name. And please pass this on to all your friends and ask any questions. We will go live and do question and answer if anybody has a desire for that. You just have to write to us and let us know, because I look at all the comments that come in. Thanks very much, Rabbi, for joining us. And
Okay. The Gemara says an interesting thing. The Gemara says that if the Jewish people had only kept Shabbos once, no nation would have had any sway, any power over the Jewish people. Just one Shabbos, back at the beginning, Parshas B'Shalach, which is coming up soon, God willing, and according to the Medrash, Das and Veviram, which were a thorn in our side the entire time until they're finally swallowed up by the earth, that they went out. Moshe was told by God to tell the Jewish people to collect a double portion there of Shabbos, and then not to go on Shabbos. Whatever we're going to prepare for Shabbos, they do on Friday. And this is we have two challahs on Shabbos for each meal because of the lechem mission that they got back at the time of the man. Das and Vevirim, always looking to cause trouble, wanted to make Moshe look like a liar. So they went out anyhow to see if the man was there. And actually, it's a long story. I have to explain these things because God can do anything. He can make the man disappear. He can make them drop dead. It's like there's a million things, but for some reason, God doesn't always work that way. And we need to know why whenever we can. But so the birds came along and ate over the leftover man. So by the time the Das and Vevirim went out, they didn't find anything. So we put out bread, Shabbos Shira, Parshas B'Shalach, for the birds to thank them for what they did back at that time to make Das and Vevirim look like liars themselves. Long story. But the point is that they broke Shabbos. They didn't. They went out and did this thing, and not everybody, of course. Just them and maybe a couple other strags. I don't know, but the parsha then goes from there. And they complain about the water. Then Amalek attacks, and so the Gemara says that you see that the reason why from the Chumash it doesn't look like that they're connected at all. From the Chumash it looks like they broke Shabbos, and then they asked for water, and they said Hayesh Hashem im ayin, is God amongst us or not, and then Amalek attacks. So that seems to be the flow of the parsha. But according to the Gemara does this. The Gemara makes almost what seem like outlandish statements, like things that like completely seem disconnected from our perspective. But they're not doing it, in any wasteful way. They're indicating to us that there's a thread here that we're overlooking completely. We have to see what it is and understand, because there's a tremendous insight once you do that, especially when it comes to a statement like this, which is talking about anti-Semitism and trying to prevent it. And the Gemara says that they would just keep two, right to that, if they just keep two Shabbos, so then we would be redeemed by keeping two Shabbos. So what's the connection? Why is Shabbos the antithesis of Amalek, who came and attacked right after that? And the Gemara plays off that. And why does it lead to redemption by keeping just two Shabbos? The famous Mordechai ben David song, just one Shabbos and we'll all be free. I'm not going to sing it for you right now. But anyhow, the point is that there's something there to be learned, that we need to know, because we're trying to bring the redemption. We just want it so badly already. It's just, we're waiting for thousands of years and it hasn't come. We've gone through a Holocaust. We've gone through terrible years before that, Tachvatat years with Chemniki pogroms and the Romans destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, and then back in we've been waiting for Mashiach since the beginning, going back to Mitzrayim. We thought that Moshe would be Mashiach, and he wasn't the final Mashiach, not yet, but he will be, God willing, at the end of history, because his neshama will come back in a Gilgal and be inside Mashiach and lead us once again to finish the job he began. And we don't know what to do. We daven like crazy. No, not maybe always every generation, and maybe not everybody, maybe not enough, but the Divrei Sons spoke about how if he thought it would work, if he knew it could do it, he would take the leaders of the generation out into the open field, and they would keep davening to Hashem for Mashiach to come until he comes. They would not go back home again until Mashiach would come. Nice idea. What happens if he doesn't come anyhow? The point is the point. Whatever he's saying that we have to work, but it didn't happen. And how many great people before us have tried and didn't happen? And how many times we heard stories like, "Oh, if we just done that, then Mashiach would have been here," but we didn't do that, so Mashiach didn't come. Oh, if you had just said that, the Mashiach. Famous story, the Rizal, who was once with his Talmidim on Erev Shabbos, and he said, "Let's spend Shabbos in Yerushalayim." Like moments before Shabbos was going to come in, they were going to go do Kvisas Aderech, a miracle, to end up from Sfat into Yerushalayim, a very short period of time. And the story goes that one of the Talmidim said, "Well, let me just go tell my wife first." No, it's not going to work. It's not going to happen. And now that you did that, you're too much in this world, and we lost the miracle. I can't verify this. It's brought down. The story is brought down to be a true story, and the Rizal was capable of doing things like that. That's for sure, tremendous miracles. But we always seem to miss what we're trying to accomplish. These great, fantastic. If only we had, didn't happen in the end. And we have spoken about, reasons why these things don't work out a lot of the time. For example, this concept called the Leelas, where God has this master plan in the pretext and sets things up to look like it can but doesn't, or that it can't and it does. And Alma Machshala Fanai, God has this master plan going back to pre-creation and the breaking the vessels, and lots and lots of things come from different angles. There's a lot of topics, there's a lot of discussions, there's a lot of details, and a lot of points to bring up, and a lot of points to reject, and it's a big, huge mess of ideas, so to speak. But there's just one thread running through it all, just very simple thread. We want Mashiach now, right? We're supposed to be mitzapeh, the Yeshua. We're supposed to be constantly anticipating and looking forward to the redemption, that it can happen anytime, even though he may tarry, as the 12th of the 13 principles of faith point out. He may tarry, may take a long time. We have to anticipate any second he can show. And the truth is, the Gemara says, that one of three things that come with Hafzek Das, we stop thinking about it, or we're not focusing on one particular thing, and that's the arrival of Mashiach. But how can you not think about it? Well, okay, during better times, for sure, when we don't feel distressed, so then people stop thinking about it. But now is not one of those times. It's a very distressing period of history. I mean, the world is descending into a lot of blackness and darkness because of the war, and because there are still hostages we haven't been able to free, and there have been a lot of deaths in the meantime. It's not something we just brush off and move on with. And on top of that, internally, we have our own problems already. There's a division between the left and the right that's not easily resolvable. The war is kind of a temporary distraction, but it doesn't seem to be eliminating it altogether. Who knows where it's going to go? And then we hear ridiculous things coming from the states and colleges and universities, and rewriting history and making up stories to incriminate the Jewish people to support the Palestinians. This stuff that's not true historically. It doesn't make a difference. As I say, don't bother me with the facts. I want to believe what I want to believe, and the amount of sheker and the amount of corruption and the amount of difficulty people have to stay on target. Stay and do what has to get done is just incredible. But the amazing thing is that the Ramchal and the Vilna Gaon, they both point out that, and we spoke about this a little bit in the past too, the idea of Pekidim v'Zechira. There's two stages to the process of redemption. The first stage is called Pekida, which means remembering. It's a remembrance of by Hashem, as it says in next week's parsha, God willing, that Hashem remembered the Jewish people. He heard their cry, remembered the Jewish people. That's called the Pekida. That's called a remembering to get the Geula process going. And the Zechira, which also means remembering, but it's a more intense remembering, meaning that this is the final redemption. So, for example, when Koresh let the Jewish people go back after only 52 years of exile, after the first temple was destroyed, that's Cyrus, for those who don't know, that was called the Pekida. It didn't finish off the redemption. It was a hint of redemption. We only got to build the foundation of the temple before Koresh rescinded his offer. We had to go back and wait until Mordechai and Esther's miracle against Haman, and then Ezra led the Jewish people back at that time, and we can start to complete the work of the base of Mikdash, which wasn't finished until Herod's time, the Roman time, and that's called the Zechira. So when you have a Pekina Zechir, Moshe going down in next week's Parsha, God says to Moshe, pull him aside with the burning bush, and he says, you're going to go down to Mitzrayim, and you're going to request that the Jewish people be freed, and Paro's going to say no, and then you have to, he doesn't mention the intensification of the slavery, but he says that, but not just that, by the way, we'll do a bunch of plagues, but he will not even let you go till the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn. Which, why don't we just skip to that one? Because you need to go to the first 9. Everything is, if God decides to do something, it's part of the process. You cannot skip steps. We might be able to skip some of the steps that we thought we were necessary to do. We had to get done, but not God. If God put something in history, it had to be. It has to happen. That's just the best way for all of us to get to where we have to go to. And so Moshe goes down, and sure enough, the slavery gets worse because he goes down there. And it looks like it's going backwards, and so much so that it even fooled the great Moshe Rabbeinu, because he comes back to God at the end of the parsha and says, why did you send me? It just got worse since I went down there. This is not the redemption we spoke about. You told me I would fail, but you never told me that the slavery would increase, and it did, and because of me, and I feel terrible. No one wants to talk to me and give me the time of day anymore because I looked at the bad guy. If you're not going to take us out, at least leave us the way it is, so it doesn't get worse. But it got worse because of you, so now we're in trouble. And God doesn't have sympathy, doesn't empathize with Moshe's complaint, but rather says to Moshe Rabbeinu, "What are you complaining about? This is the redemption. This is the fulfillment of the promises I made to Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov, and they didn't get to see this like you're seeing it, and they just trusted and believed in me, and you're witnessing it, and you're questioning me." Right, so that's a very harsh response to Moshe's not complaining so much about for himself. He's complaining because he feels bad for his brothers. We know that Moshe was someone who was no so all the chavero. He felt the burden of his brothers. So certainly here too. Now to know he's the cause of it, right, made him feel even worse. But God's not empathetic, and he's not sympathetic, and instead he criticizes Moshe for his response. Why? Because, and this is important, very important, once a Pekida takes place, once God does something to indicate redemption is on its way, no matter what happens after that, it's not aborted. He doesn't cancel it. Human beings make mistakes, obviously, lots of them, terrible mistakes. We can think that we're ready for something, or the world's ready for something, and turns out it's not. We miscalculated. We can't take everything into consideration. We do the best we can. And a lot of times, Baruch Hashem, especially with Seitar Shmaya, we're successful. We anticipated correctly. But a lot of times, no. And we have to abort something. Even the invasion of Normandy, right, back in World War II, D-Day, they were on their way. And the weather changed, and it became terrible. And they were worried about even a greater disaster than the one they were concerned about. And they turned around, went back, and they had to do it all over again. They were worried about having lost the element of surprise, which was crucial for D-Day. And then a miracle happened, and it didn't. And the casualties were unbelievable, but it was the beginning of the end of the war. So we can make those mistakes, and we can't take into account all the things that can go wrong, but God does. So if God initiates the redemption process, it's because the redemption is at hand. So therefore, even if it turns out that things look like they're getting worse, and certainly for us, that seems to have been the case. It's very hard not to call 1948 the getting of the Jewish state back in the Jewish hands officially by the world agreeing to it. We already had the land. The Balfour Agreement already sectioned off the land to divide it, but to become an official country in 1948 because of the UN vote, That's hugely important. First, everyone thought, well, not necessarily, but the Vilna Gaon says that if we don't merit to do tshuva and fix the world up and get everyone believing to God, and therefore everyone just lets us have the land and we do it the nice way, the right after the sunset type of way, right? Then it's going to happen. They're small, and they're small means we have to have the agreement of the nations of the world. That's what Koresh was back in Koresh's time. He said, "Go ahead, build the base of Mikdash." That he was the ruling power of the world at that time, and therefore, if he says, it's like he represents the whole world. So if he says go back, you can go back. And in our time, we don't have that. We have America over here, we have Russia over here, we have Europe and all the European states, and so how are you going to get everybody to vote on that? Well, that's what the UN was. The UN allowed that to happen, and they made that vote. Because they made that vote, so we were able to fulfill that condition. And then all the hashgacha pratis about Truman and how it came to be, and there's just so much going on to make 1940 a reality from a Torah perspective, not a secular perspective, a Torah perspective. You just look at the hashgacha pratis. I did the research, and the more I looked, the more I found, and the more I found, the more I was amazed. And I'm convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that was a pekida. That was definitely a pekida. It was a sign that we're in the process of redemption, especially after the Holocaust and 2,000 years of Roman exile. And that's already a very mesuyam number, right? There's a lot of evidence to talk about that. And the Gemara says that even when it's going back, it looks like it's going back, which is still going forward, because God doesn't make mistakes. Not that God says, "Oh, I thought that I could get this thing going in 1948, but turns out I didn't take into consideration all the possible things that could go wrong, and there they are going wrong. So therefore, I'm going to scratch the whole thing. What to do later on in the future?" No. If God decides to give the Jewish people the land in 1948, it's because He says, like to Moshe Rabbeinu going down to Egypt, this is the time. But there's going to be ups and downs and backwards and forwards, but they're all forwards as they grow. It's all forward. It's all part of the process. Why must we go through a war like this? Why must we have experience we experienced on October 7th? And why must we have to deal with all the leftist mishugas and all the sheker and the why because we don't know yet exactly. That's what Hashem is going to have to show us later on. But we have an emunah, and that emunah is it's all part of the process. We're moving forward. But there is something that we're supposed to get out of this. There is something that we're supposed to do, and really, and I don't want to get into this too much right now. Really, the bottom line is that the redemption is going to happen when Hashem decides it's going to happen, exactly at that time, that He knew from Maaseh Bereshis. It was built into the creation, because anyhow, we are 5,784 years old, mankind. That's how long we've been here according to the Torah. And it was for us to hear that it was Nigzar back at the beginning, and here we are down the road, and it's so long. We're close to the end, thank God. We have that advantage. But it's hard to us to fathom how, if God knew it the entire time, then what was all the history in between for? Couldn't He? We're supposed to believe the Mashiach can come any time. He didn't. Could have, but He didn't. But He could have, but He didn't. Yeah, because He wasn't supposed to. But they believed that He could. And that's all that counts. And they tried. They lived. They made their effort. They're going to the world to come. Those who tried to fix the world because they believed it could happen in their lifetime, they got their schar. The Fum Sarah Agar, according to the effort, is a reward. But they lived and they died without Mashiach coming. And the next generation, and the next generation, next generation. But for God, past, present, and future are all one thing. When God decided back at the beginning the Mashiach should come, it's because He already knew at the end of history what it has to look like, because He made the whole plan anyhow. And it was all set up. But that doesn't change our responsibility. For example, that someone is meant to be killed, right? People get killed in this world, and it has to happen by someone who's going to kill them, because that's the way the world was set up. The Gemara brings this example by an Ir Miklat. Now, for example, that somebody let's say, killed intentionally, but there were no witnesses. Somebody killed accidentally, and again, there were no witnesses. So the guy who killed intentionally with witnesses would have been killed because that's called for capital punishment. But the guy who killed accidentally, in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, we had Ir Miklat. We had places that accidental murderers had to go and live the rest of their lives, unless the Kohen Gadol died during their lifetime. But that they had to go. They were judged, and if they were found guilty of killing the person accidentally, they had to run to this place, and that's where they had to stay. If they stepped outside, they could be killed by an avenger of the family blood. But that was a din. Now this guy got off because no one saw him, and they both got off. So what does God do? He brings him to the same inn, the same hotel. In those days, they had ladders and things like that to go up. That's whatever. In modern day terms, you have the same type of thing as well. And what happens is the person who killed purposely is walking under the ladder, as the person who killed accidentally. They don't know each other. They just happen to be, because of divine presence, the exact same hotel. And the guy who killed accidentally last time is climbing the ladder, but this time the ladder breaks. He falls on top of the person. He kills the person who killed intentionally, because he had to die anyhow. And he killed accidentally, but this time there are witnesses in the lobby who watched the whole thing. And so now he's going to have to deal with the situation of an accidental murderer. So God's constantly, he doesn't just make shidduchim between husband and wives. He makes all kinds of shidduchim between those who need to be killed and those who have to do the killing. So you make yourself into somebody that God can either plug in for good or plug in for bad. That's where our free will makes a difference in life. So we don't know if we could finish this shiur or even halfway through it, and God could say, well, this is the moment I decided for Mashiach to come, and all of a sudden, the whole world breaks open, and sirens go off, and this, and all these things happen that are all part of the final redemption. We didn't expect it. We didn't see it coming. And, someone could say, like with all their energy, I want Mashiach now. And all of a sudden they find out the Mashiach is here. It looks as if they're saying that brought Mashiach. It didn't. Mashiach was going to come at that time because that's the moment the Mashiach has to come. What about the guy? Yeah, but that's the beautiful thing about it. God says to Moshe Rabbeinu, build the Mishkan. I can't. I know you can't. We both know you can't. But just do what you can do, and I will take care of the rest, says God, and I will give you the credit as if you built the Mishkan. And that's all that counts anyhow. Because, this world is a corridor. It comes and it goes. And the main world is the world to come. And that's where we get the schar for all of our Mesiras Nefesh, our self-sacrifice for the service of God. But we didn't build the Mishkan. It's okay. If God says the fact that you willed to do it, the fact that you agreed to be involved, the fact that you would have if you could have, is good enough for me. The fact that you didn't, incidental. Because all that counts in the end is your ratzon, is your perception, what you believe and what you do and how you act towards the world and the responsibility you take to be a partner with God in the fulfillment of the master plan for creation. That's all that counts in the end. So Mashiach is going to come whenever he's going to come, and God willing, this next moment, now there's next moment, okay, whatever, but hopefully very, very soon. And now the only question we're left with is, can I be one of those people who do something that theoretically brings Mashiach, even though we know he doesn't really, that God, he'll bring him, but I can be credited and feel as if I'm the one who did it. I mean, so often in life, this is what happens, right? You do something, sometimes even accidentally, you don't even know the impact of what you're going to do, what you're going to have. I mean, I had a story once like this, personal story, where somebody who was in yeshiva at the time I was there was going back to North America, and everybody felt it was premature. He wasn't prepared to go back to on a college campus because he had just been learning for a short period of time, and we're all worried he was going to lose it. You go back, you think you're strong, but it takes time until it's part of who you are to such an extent that nothing can shake it. 5, 6 months, 7 months is not enough time. You're in a yeshiva environment is completely supportive. Everybody's doing the same thing. They're all thinking the same thing. You're all talking about the same thing. So you feel strong. But when you're on your own, then it's a whole different story. And everyone kept telling him, You gotta stay, you gotta stay, you gotta stay. And I got in late. I was one of the people who spoke to him like later than everybody else. And I figured it's all been said. So I just said to him, I said, you know something? 6 months, you're out of this thing. You won't be religious anymore. I'm sorry. I like you a lot. I believed in you, but I don't think you have the ability to be able to withstand that type of pressure, and you'll lose it all within 6 months. Anyhow, he left anyhow. Didn't have any impact on him. He just left. And about a year later, I was shocked to find that I was wrong. I was wrong. He was on his way back to yeshiva. He finished a year of his learning, was on his way back to yeshiva. He was coming back to mechazik himself to become stronger in mitzvahs. And I was so grateful to him, that I was happy to be wrong. I'm not always happy to be wrong, but in this case I was. It was okay. Better to be this way. So when he got back finally, and I'm in Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalayim, the old city. He got back to the yeshiva, and I said, I just got to ask you, I really believe that you wouldn't have made it, and here you are. You came back to yeshiva. I call it kavod to you. He said, let me tell you a story. He said, what you said actually kind of came true. Basically, I was losing it, and I didn't feel bad about it. I just felt that I didn't, I was kind of like, caught up in the atmosphere and what everyone else was doing. Even though his brother was religious, I was caught up in the atmosphere and the whole thing like that. And I thought that now when I'm back, I am more realistic. I can see I'm opposing opinions and all that. So therefore, I was more open. And I figured, okay, I'll keep maybe a little bit, not so much, but I was losing it. I was kidding myself. He said. So I said, what happened? What happened? He said, you came back for a visit, because we were from the same city. You came back for a visit this last summer, right? I said, yeah, visit my parents. I wasn't married yet, and I was going back to visit family every summer at that time. And he said, you took the subway to Summerhill subway station. I said, yeah, that's my parents live right on the block from there. He said, you didn't see me, but I saw you. I was there in the same subway, the same time. I was on the phone actually, and you didn't notice me. He said, but I saw you come off the subway wearing your black hat and your jacket and all that, which was not so comfortable in those days to do like that thing. But that's I had to do it. That's what I was doing. He said, the moment I saw you, he said, boom, it clicked. What you told me back in yeshiva, all of a sudden it became, I cannot believe this. What he said has come true, and I let it come true. And he said, it so shook him up. He made a decision right then and there. He's going back to yeshiva. Right then and there, the subway station. Now, I didn't know about this. He didn't call me up to say, I saw you. He didn't call me to say, I'm coming back. I just heard nothing. And the next thing I heard, I was back in Israel already. And next thing I heard was he's coming back to yeshiva. That's all I heard. But he told me that this was the turning point for him. Now, the truth is, that was his life. That was his journey. What I said to him didn't make a difference ultimately. It was hashgacha pratis. Hashem put it in my head. We met, that moment in time, everybody said what they were told to say from Shemaim. That's what I said. That's what right? For some reason, and I don't know if this very reason, this very day, but for some reason, my being in the subway at that time, that he could see me, and that should impact him because a moment before doesn't work. A moment later, it doesn't work. Another place, everything, down to the last detail, Hashem is mashadech. He arranges and he sets it up and matches things all the entire time. And I don't know why I had that schus to have that impact on him. But he was meant to come back. He was meant to go back, go to what he went through, and then come back to yeshiva. That nothing to do with me. But I got to be there at the right time in the right place for whatever reason. And that's just my story. How many other stories that other people have that are more dramatic, more fantastic, more amazing than that one? And you make yourself into whoever you have to be, so that when whatever has to happen happens, like Pinchas killing Zimri and Cosby, someone had to do it, and someone was going to do it. It's not like if Pinchas didn't do it, nobody else is going to do it. No, someone's going to do it. But Pinchas was the one who was chosen. The law of inheritance that the Benat Slachat, where it was Zochet to teach from Parshas Pinchas, was going to be taught anyhow. Somehow, that it's not like God said, well, if they hadn't brought it up, I wouldn't have put it in the Torah. No, that's It's a piece of Torah. It was meant to be there. So it was going to be there, at some point in time. But they had the merit. And Rashi says, why? Because they came from Menashe, who loved Eretz Yisrael, because Yosef loved Eretz Yisrael, whatever. But that's, we have to be the ones to work on ourselves, to do whatever we can, so that when the good thing happens, not the bad thing, we don't want that. When the good thing happens, it's as if we made it happen. And don't say, well, it's just a fairy tale, it's just no, it's not a fantasy. It might be that we don't, anyhow, do you brush your teeth? No, God gives you the courage to brush your teeth. You feed yourself, God gives you the courage to feed yourself. You make money, God gives you the money. It's all good anyhow. What's the difference? There's nothing new about this if we're taking God seriously and Hashgacha Prati seriously. But there's some big events where this can happen on a much larger scale, like Geula for the entire nation. So Pinchas gets credited for having saved the entire nation. What a schus. Notice Lavchad get mentioned several times in the Chumash, teaching a law. What a merit! What a merit! How many daughters have lived and died without that merit? And the same thing is true that if anybody else, the same thing, right? So what happens? You have to know what you should be doing, how you should be doing it. So if we go back to the original concept, right? I'd mentioned a Torah code, I believe last week, or I was going to mention Torah code. I'm not sure. I don't remember anymore. 1 week is a long time. But I actually just printed it out because I wanted to show you. It's a little easier to with the whiteboards like that. But this is the pasuk. Okay, this is the end of Parshas Miketz. This is after Binyamin is caught with Yosef's coast. They planted it. It was a conspiracy with Yosef and his son to get Binyamin and the whole family back. And then Yosef playing the part of viceroy still because they don't know who he is. But Yomer lehem Yosef ma masa zeh asher asisem halo yadatem ki nachesh yinechesh ish asher kamoni. That's the pasuk right there in the Chumash, right? And you'll see. Look at the circles. The circles are circling a single letter. And the distance between each of those letters is just 2 letters. Negative because it's going backwards, called -2, because they're not going forward but going backwards. It's forming the word in reverse. Mem, Shin, Yud, Ches, which is Mashiach, and then the word in blue is Nachesh, right? Which in this case, it's the same letters as Nachesh. Nachesh is a snake, right? And Yenachesh means the divine because they often use snakes for things like this, snake charmers and getting snakes to talk, as a vehicle for a voice to talk through the snake. And this is a remarkable thing. Just to find it alone was actually quite remarkable. And to find it's people talk about Torah codes and all the criticism you have of Torah codes, whether they're mathematically true or not, all the conditions they have to be able to say whether it's something that's reliable. Bible critics, they're in another universe. They're talking about the Chumash like they know what it's all about. They know nothing about it. Names of God. They know nothing about it. They didn't learn Kabbalah. They didn't learn Rashi and Meforshim on the Chumash. They're talking about the Chumash like it's under a slide on a microscope to examine it from a completely secular perspective, with not a belief in God and not understanding Jewish tradition and not even caring about Jewish tradition, even though it's our safer and we give it to the world and we've been teaching it for thousands of years, but who cares, right? The same thing with physicists, completely disregard Kabbalah and the explanation of how the world came to be and all that, because who cares? They can't measure it, they don't know it, it's like it doesn't exist. So saying the Torah codes, if you don't believe the Torah came from God, then Torah codes are just a mathematical question mark. That's all they are. And then you have a certain criteria, and how do you know? Another universe. Another world. If you know that the Torah is from God and everything, the entire Torah is God's names and everything is Hashgacha Pratis and Moshe got it from God, letter by letter, word for, you believe that, and I do, right? And that's part of our faith as a from Jew. 3,000 years ago, you didn't have to have faith about that. They witnessed it firsthand, and the next generation knew that their parents witnessed it firsthand, and this went on for a while until it got so distant and so far, and assimilation and persecution, that now we're in the stage of history where we have to, it's an emunah. because the experience is so removed from us. But nevertheless, this is the understanding and the belief. And when you've seen as much as most people who are from have seen, and if you know Kabbalah especially, then it's as if you're Mount Sinai again, because the evidence that the Torah is from God is so overwhelming, even just intellectually. But of course, you can't see that unless you go inside and do the work. You just can't have an experience of it and say, oh, wow, some people maybe do, but in general, it's not the way it works. Kiruv takes a couple of years of learning and an investment of time to get to the truth. That's the way it should be. That's the way life truth should be something you have to pursue after and find. But it becomes that crystal clear. So from that perspective, everything's divine providence. And the fact that an event occurred, and then after the fact you've had a code to support it in an area where it's absolutely remarkable to find it there, we look at that as complete hashgacha pratis. Forget about statistics. And they're interesting. Statistics are really more as part of a presentation to people who don't believe, because that gets their attention. Just like using physics to try to explain, a concept and show how Kabbalah talks about the same idea. It talks to people who don't believe, to get them in the door so they listen to more. But once you're a believer, none of that stuff makes a difference. God's talking to me through the Torah. This is here. This is remarkable. Me'es Hashem, Haisa Zos, Hini was Meinenu. That's what we say. That's one of our national anthems that David Melech wrote. This is from God, that which is wondrous in my eyes. And this is wondrous in my eyes. Why is this wondrous in my eyes? Because, first of all, Mashiach is there, built in, two letters, back like this. And it's in the same verse that the word Nachash, the letters of Nachash. Why is that important? Because Nachash and Mashiach have the same gematria. But lots of things have the same gematria as Mashiach. They can make a whole list of things, but they say, but there's a reason for this, why it's so important. Chazal explained, long before there was such a thing as Torah codes, Chazal already wrote that the gematria, which is a part of Kabbalah, and this is a very simple gematria, there's like complicated gematrias that really seem convoluted, but this is a very simple gematria, that Mashiach and Nachash equal the same thing because they're really two sides of the same coin. Two sides. Nachash spoke to Chava and caused it to go into exile, all of mankind into exile, and Mashiach would take us out. So really, if the Nachash had not done what he had done, or we hadn't fallen for it, and Adam had instead resisted the Nachash and his wife, for that matter, or she resisted, then rather than going to exile, that would have been, if we'd gone to Shabbos without breaking the command of God, that was already the Messianic year, Yemos Mashiach. So the fact that these two things are side by side like this, and the word Nachash, there are 79,980 words in the entire Torah. 79,980. And the word Nachash is not that many of them. Very, very, very few. Appears at the beginning, appears by Dan. There's a couple places, but not that much. And then here, in this pasuk that Yosef is setting up. So maybe Yosef is hinting something to his brothers, and maybe he's not. Maybe he didn't even know he was doing this. Maybe this is the way that God dictated the whole thing to Moshe Rabbeinu for us, that we should know, that we should get something of this. This is a turning point. This is a major turning point, not just in the story of Yosef and his brothers, because this is going to set up the final showdown where he says, Ani Yosef, and then the whole thing starts to, flow from there. But this is the moment that the brothers have a chance to do the tshuva that's going to determine whether we're going to have to go into hundreds of years of Egyptian exile, followed by decades of Babylonian exile, followed by almost 200 years of Greek exile, followed by 2,000 years of Roman exile, and now we have the tail end with Yishmael, causing us nothing but consternation and suffering and terrible things, and the world going up the deep end, right? And Mashiach is this is the turning point right here, right? This moment right here. Like Yosef has gone to such great extent to set this moment up. He's not taking revenge. Clearly, otherwise God would get him after. He'd have to punish Yosef. He's not punished at all for what he does here, because he's completely L'Shem Shemayim. He's doing it completely for the sake of the brothers, completely for the sake of Jewish history. He's acting on behalf of Hashem. In fact, so much so that the Medrash says that when Yosef says Ani Yosef, and the brothers, of course, are flabbergasted, they're shocked, they can't speak. So the Medrash says, what's the Lashon? Well, in English, the Lashon is woe for us in the day of judgment, woe for us in the day of tochacha, of criticism. When Ani Yosef, just like the brothers, doesn't explain itself, by the way, it just says that. But again, people explain, because whatever happened by Yosef and his brothers is going to happen in Yom Adin too, the day of judgment for everybody. Just like the brothers found out a piece of information that blew them away, just shut them down completely. Likewise, on our future day of judgment, after all this history is over, and we're standing before God in his heavenly tribune, and he has to judge us, we're going to hear something that's going to cause us to have the same reaction. Some of the rabbis, they tacked it onto this thing of like whatever about the Yosef and his brothers somehow is about all of history. So this is what Yosef's setting up. Yosef is trying to make redemption. He wants redemption. And not, by the way, not just any redemption, not just this redemption. He wants the redemption. Because take a look. That's what they're thinking about in this week's parsha. Yaakov Avinu, he wants to reveal the end of days to his sons. He tries. He starts off saying, gather around. So I can tell you what's going to happen. Achus Yamim. He can't. He loses the prophecy there. And the Gemara says, right, what happened? So Yaakov said, whoa. Where'd that prophecy go? Not from me. Not because of me. It has to be because of you guys. So I'm going to ask you, right? My grandfather gave birth to Ishmael, and that was bad news. And my father gave birth to Esav, and that was bad news. Maybe I have continued on and given birth to somebody who's also bad news, and that's why the prophecy left me. So the brothers come back and they say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and Yaakov says, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Amved, which, as we mentioned before a few times, that the Zohar says that was Yaakov was saying, but not quite. But the question is, what did he ask about? What did he ask them about that they're answering like this? Because obviously, it's like either it's a weird conversation or that was the answer to the question. Then that was the answer. Well, what the answer Shema is Yichud Hashem. It's Hashem Elokeinu. We end up Yom Kippur, right? Hashem Hu Elokim 7 times. That's the issue. That's the whole issue of life. Hashem Hu Elokim. So they're saying Shema Yisrael, and the Gemara explained, just like God is one in your heart, God's one in our heart too. We're one with the oneness of God. And Yaakov says that's not true, because if it was true, then this prophecy wouldn't have left me, because this is what the end of days is all about. This Yichud Hashem. What do you mean? What's Yichud Hashem? What's Yichud Hashem? What does it mean? When Zechariah says it, Zechariah says on that day when Mashiach finally comes and the world is finally fixed up, right? God will be king on the entire land, and he will be one, and his name will be one. So again, Yichud Hashem, Yichud Hashem. I mean, it's an amazing thing. I mean, you don't hear about it. I mean, you put on your talis in the morning for those who do this. There's a declaration before you put it on. And before you put on your tefillin, if you put on tefillin, right there. And you find in a lot of Haggadahs, before you make the Kiddush, the 4 times, the Arba Kosas, and before lot in Hanukkah, and all over the place. And some people said, before they light their Shabbos candles, right? What's Lashon? No, that's a different thing. L'Shem Yichud Shabrichu Ushchintei, right? This is for the sake of a Kush Baruch Hu and a Shechina, the Yeched Shem Yud Ke Vav Ke, to unify Yud Ke, because Amalek divides that, Yud Ke and Vav Ke, Shlim, completely, right? B'chu or Chemud, with in fear and love, B'Shem Kol Yisrael, in the name of the entire Jewish people. I'm doing this mitzvah for Yichud Hashem. I'm putting on my towels for Yichud Hashem. I'm putting on my tefillin for Yichud Hashem. I'm davening today for Yichud Hashem. Shachris, Mincha, Mariv. I'm saying to Hillel, Yichud Hashem. You want to get back the hostages? Yichud Hashem. You want to stop the war? Yichud Hashem. You want to get Parnasa? Yichud Hashem. It's just one answer across the board. And yet, you go to a cheder and you listen to them teaching the kids, and there's no mention of Yichud Hashem anywhere. You go to Yeshiva Katana, and no one's talking about Yichud Hashem anywhere. It's just an assumed thing. You have to learn it on your own, whatever. Figure it out for yourself. In the meantime, let's learn all this. Halacha. You go to Yeshiva Gedola, same thing. No one talks about it. And yet, there is nothing else. Yichud Hashem. So that's what Yaakov's obviously asking the brothers about. Did everybody fix up Yichud Hashem, the unification? I've been saying this over and over again. The unification of the name of God. I mean, at the end of Parshat Bashalach, Amalek, right? Amalek attacks the Jewish people because why? Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu im ayin. Now, ayin literally it means is God amongst us or not? That's what that is. God amongst. What do you mean? Is God amongst you? You just had the miraculous splitting the sea. You're eating man, which is miraculous. 10 plagues. You left me trying. How can you? God, you want a seminar or something? Like no. So that's why Kabbalah says no. They're not asking that question. They're asking is Hashem amongst us or a higher level of God, which is Havaya. Well, there's the God who works through Teva, like Paro understood, right? He believed that Elohim works through, through Teva, through nature. And there's Havaya, which does all the miracles, the open revelation of God in this world. And they're one and the same thing. There's no such thing as the news talking about bad guys doing bad things. That's Hashem. That's Hashem doing that. You want to get angry? Get angry yourself. Get angry at the world, the Jewish people who are not doing Yichud Hashem. Because everything that goes wrong is because of lack of, that's the missing ingredient. Everything's going wrong. All that we're doing in our lifetime. The moment that we do anything in our life that indicates in the slightest of ways that we're not connecting up what's happening directly back to Akash Baruch Hu, we're doing Amalek's Perut Hashem. We're dividing the name. And that results in Galus. That results in exile. And that's what Yaakov is trying to tell his brothers right here, right? Mashiach, Nachash, or his sons. No, his brothers. Yosef. This is Yaakov's son. This is what Yosef trying to tell his brothers right here. That's what he's telling Yehuda. You understand that the reason why all this is gone south on you is because the Medrash says that when they sold Yosef, we don't even hear Yosef crying. We don't hear till later on, and after they're already being, getting in trouble with Yosef and having all this trouble, that they even heard him scream out and ignored him. We don't hear that at the time. It's like, "Hi, Yosef, come. We're going to say it. Bye bye." That's all. It's like, boom, boom, boom. It's over. We don't hear anything at that because that's the way they looked at it. That's the way they acted. That's how certain they were themselves. And not just that, but the Medrash says that they even imposed an oath on God and said to him that don't tell Yaakov, don't tell our father what we've done over here. Don't tell him that we sold Yosef, please, right? And we're going to put an oath. First of all, how do you do it? But who puts an oath on God? I can put an oath on you. You can put an oath on me because I don't know everything. You don't know everything. So maybe I know something you don't know, and I know the disaster results. I can say, take an oath. You won't spill the beans. Because maybe by doing so, you'll do a destructive thing to protect the situation, take an oath. But if God decides that it's the right thing to tell Yaakov, you're going to ask God to do the wrong thing? Don't tell him. Don't tell him. This is God we're talking about, okay? And if God decides he's not going to tell Yaakov, can you make God tell? No. So what does it even mean that they imposed an oath on God? It means that they acted in such a way, they were so locked into their belief, they were so sure that they didn't bother consulting with God. They didn't bother consulting with Yaakov, who could consult with God. Ask him, what's with Yosef? We see this and we see that, and we're not sure. But now, what do you see? They didn't do that. They acted as if they're the ones who have to make the decision. So God says, okay, that's the way you want to go. That's the route you want to take. I'm gonna have to go along with that one because you need to learn a lesson. You need to understand the deeper, Same thing, Manasseh. Yeshaya says to Manasseh, why did you not get married and have children? It's a Torah mitzvah. And Chizkiyahu. And Chizkiyahu says, he's a righteous king. Chizkiyahu says to Yeshaya, because I have a prophecy that I'm going to give birth to a son who's going to turn this country back to idol worship after I spent all this time convincing them not to do idol worship. I don't want that. I want nothing to do with that. So I'm not going to get married. I'm not going to have children. So Yeshaya says, big mistake. You're going to lose your world, this world, and the world to come. It's such a terrible affair you're doing. I don't care about just where you're going to lose everything. They were actually they weren't in the best of terms, the two of them. And you want to go ahead, but I'm told by God to tell you to write your will because you're losing it all. And so he gets married, has child, has Manasseh, right? But it's like, what about God? You don't like the ask? Why must there be a Manasseh? You can't tell me? Okay, I'll just have to trust you for the process. So let's go back to the first place all of this happened. It used to always bother me to read the story because it's so weird. If you're paying attention and you're not just going with the flow, it was weird. There's the snake, the original snake, talking to Chava. And they have this dialogue. And Chava says, Elokim. Doesn't say Hashem Elokim. Elokim, a lack of Yichud Hashem. She just talks about Elokim, who is the level of Teva. Right? And he says, no, Elokim also, the Nachash back in Mishnah. Where is God in all of this? Where is he? From reading the story, it seems like God's somewhere else altogether. Like they're on their own, some back room, secretly in the dark, talking, and having no idea what's going on. But it's like an operating theater. They're all up there quietly watching the surgery down below. You have to forget they're the doctor operating, but they're watching. They're right there watching. Shh, don't make a peep. And God is right there. Adam's not right there. He's on a teal somewhere in the garden with God also. But God's right. God's watching the whole thing, saying nothing. It's all unfolding. So why does the Torah convey, as if he's not there? Because the Torah wants you to feel what it was like for them, that you can see for yourself what it could be like. So the Torah, you can only if you're God ready, you can do this type of a thing. But the Torah is like saying, this is what it was like for her. Even though we know that God's right there, and any mom can say, what are you doing? Like the mother who's standing watching the child. Will he? Won't he? And just he puts his hand, she gives him a chance not to do it. But when it gets to the point where he's just about to touch the cookie, what are you doing? You can't take that cookie before supper, and he jumps 1,000,000 miles in the air because he got caught in the act. So, why doesn't God say, oh, you give us a snake after I told you not to do it? No, had to go through the whole process. And then God shows up as Ayeka, as if I was someplace else, and here I am, and you surprise, what you've done. No, I know exactly where you are. I know exactly what you've done. I even set the whole thing up in the end. But that's the way they acted. That's the way they behaved. And Yosef has these dreams. And, the Gemara says that a person should at least wait 22 years before they give up on their dreams. Because that's how long it took for Yosef to remember. He didn't even know that going down to Egypt was a fulfillment of his dreams. Only in Parshas Miketz, when he finally sees them bow down, he says he remembers his dreams. Now, this is what I dreamed about. But until now, he was, when might my dreams come true? He wasn't thinking about it, forgot about it, but this reminded him, but not the brothers, not them. And when Yaakov said, this could be true one day, they should have said, okay, listen, like Nachamish Gamzu. Nachamish Gamzu? He was Rabbi Akiva's Rebbe, one of his Rebbes. He was called Gamzu, Nachamish Gamzu, because I always said Gamzu Tov. Whatever happened to him, this is for the good. So what happens? They have to undo a Roman edict that does not let the Jews learn Torah and things like that. So they sent emissaries to Rome to buy off the Caesar, hopefully to tear up the decree. And Nachamish Gamzu was one of them. Rabbi Kiva, big rabbis at that time going, and they have a chest filled with gold and silver and money, whatever they can put into it to impress the Caesar. And it happens to be that the innkeeper is a big thing. And he figures out that that's money inside this thing. So when they're sleeping at nighttime, he takes all the jewels and money, fills it with sand and dirt instead. Okay? And then they wake up the next morning, and they're not dumb. They opened up the chest to double check, and sure enough, it was dirt. Everybody wants to go back home and refill it. We can't go with dirt like this to Rome. Gamzu Latova, says Nachum. Gamzu Latova, let's go forward. Okay, he's the Rebbe. He's the one whom the Gemara says was familiar with miracles. If he says, let's trust, and we go. And they get to Rome, and they stand before the Caesar, and the Caesar says, what have you brought me? This chest. They open it up, and there's dirt inside of it. And he's going, what? The Jews are making fun of me? You brought dirt all this way? And everyone's like, uh-oh. We knew we should have gone back home. And Nachum just says, Gams Latova. This too is for the good. I wonder what God is doing. We're doing everything right. So this is God. This is God. What does he have in mind? He's testing us? Whatever, Gams Latova. And the Gemara says at that moment in time, Eliyahu, dressed up as a Roman officer, whispers into the ear of the Caesar and says, there's a story that their ancestor, the great Avram Avinu, once was fighting a war, and rather than use weapons, he used dirt. And as he threw it, it became swords and all kinds of, and spears, and he was able to vanquish his enemy with this dirt. Maybe that's the same type of dirt. So Caesar is intrigued, and apparently they were fighting against some people somewhere, and they could not be matzliach, they could not be successful. So he decides to test it out, and they take this thing of dirt, and they use it, and they throw it, and sure enough, they win the war, the battle. Caesar's duly impressed. I mean, everyone wasn't under house arrest until they got the results, but now that the results are in, he brings them back and says, you guys are heroes, I love you guys, you can have whatever you want. He opens up his storeroom with jewels and all that, and they find the document with the decree, and they say, we want this. And he says, you can have it. They rip it up, and that's the end of the decree. And he also gives them a whole chest filled with money and gold and silver and sends them on their way. What a happy ending. Riding off into the sunset with a chest full of gold and silver and a ripped up decree. And they stay at the same hotel on the way back in. And the innkeeper says, I'm surprised to see you. How'd it go? Wonderful. We got this chest of money and all that. And it just was fantastic. So the guy says to himself, okay, I guess the Caesar's into dirt. And he packs up a whole bunch of dirt and goes to Rome. And he stands with the Caesar, says, Caesar, I brought you all this dirt. And the guy says, what, you idiot? Kills him. So he gets his just desert, his just reward. And actually comes, and everyone else goes home happily. It's all happily ever after. But Gums is over. Trusted the process. The brothers could have said, we don't like him. We think he's a nuisance. We think he's a potential danger to the Jewish people. But if God decides that he's going to be king one day, let's give him a chance. Let's see where it goes. Okay, so we'll avoid him as much as possible. Meantime, until he grows up and matures a bit. But if our Father sees something and God sees something to give him these dreams of, maybe it's not delusions of grandeur. Maybe it's something real, and we should take into account this is the plan of God. And see it that way. And that would have solved everything. But of course they didn't, because that's divine providence, that's that's history. But that's Yichud Hashem. That's what on a level like that, no one can. This is what the parsha ends off with the brothers coming to Yosef and saying to him, because Yosef used to have them up for dinner, and now they weren't coming anymore because Yosef was very busy. He did it because of his father, honor his father. They had the whole family over for dinner. Once his father was dead, so there was not as much of a imperative to have them all together. But they took it the wrong way because they're feeling guilty of the sale. It's on their conscience still. And they say to Yosef, they actually speak to Menashe, and they tell Menashe to tell Yosef that our father told us to tell you before he died that we should tell you later on not to take revenge against us for what we did. And Yosef knows through lying because he knows that Yaakov never suspected him of such a thing. And he says classic words, am I in place of God? You meant to do me harm. And look, it was all to save the Jewish people in the end. So I'm one person. There's 10 of you. Can I do you harm? Yeah, but you manage the mightiest army in the whole world. You're one of the heads of Egypt. You say off the head, it's off with the head. No, that's not true. I can only say off with the head and cause it to happen if God wants that person to lose their head. But if not, there's nothing I can do. Right? That many of the plans and the thoughts of a person, right? But God's will is what prevails. As they say in Yiddish, man dances and God laughs. It's like we're that's Yichud Hashem. That's Geula. The moment a person in their own personal life is able to reach this level of Havaya Elokim, and I know this is a deep concept, so we can't just leave it here and not talk about it again next week, B'ezras Hashem. But we'll go into more detail, more practical detail about this idea. But this is the foundation. The moment a person is able to do that, and we'll see that's what's going in Mitzrayim. That's the whole exile in Mitzrayim to the redemption has been all about building this yichud. We'll see it inside. So obvious once you see it. And the moment a person achieves it, they personally can already experience redemption, even if the rest of the nation's still in exile. And if the whole nation reaches it, that's it. We're done. Work is over. And Mashiach comes, and it boom, 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 falls into place. Have a good Shabbos.
Rabbi, can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Okay. Number one, I would like you to try to give in light of what you said tonight, which was very deep, and I have a lot more questions that I'll ask personally, privately, and maybe you'll make a whole shiur out of it. But last week you mentioned that you have to make yourself the proper vessel in order to receive, this light that comes in. So, and then there are tzaddikim in the world. You said that they disassociate from so much in the world that gives them pleasure, and they're the ones that really enjoy life more because they're the ones that this probably brings them the Yichud Hashem, I imagine, right?
Absolutely.
But number one, I have a Rebbitzin. I have a Rebbitzin who I think lives like that. She keeps herself nice and beautiful and everything else. Like, she dresses nicely, whatever. She doesn't deprive herself live like a pauper, but she does. She's never been on the internet. She doesn't go out to anything. She davens and she teaches and she's brilliant and she's unbelievable. And I look at her as someone like that, and I'm thinking I'm probably not going to reach that level myself. So where can an average person like me, who's really concerned about becoming Yichud Hashem, how can an average person either turn into someone like her, or can we in our own self?
Like you're basically indicating. We have role models to help us understand what we're supposed to do, but nobody is meant to be like anybody else. Everybody has their own personal level, and it really goes down to consciousness. Like this question you're asking, a lot of people who also know this Rebbe, they're not asking that question. It's not their consciousness. They're not thinking of it. It's not real to them. They might admire and want to emulate certain things, but it's not bugging them. So for them, they're not going to get to that point. But the starting point to getting to a higher level is asking that question. And the fact that you ask the question, that already is a major step in that direction. And that's what we have to do. That's what Yosef was doing to his brothers the entire time. Look what they're doing. All they can do is ask questions. They're like, what's going on? What's going on? Why is this happening? What's God want from us? What's God want from us? Right? Without that, they weren't asking any questions. It was like, okay, Abba refuses to stop mourning. Okay, we didn't calculate that one and whatever. But Yosef is gone. Maybe we should. But what everything Yosef does is an attack of Ashkacha Pratis, and the brothers see it. And that's why I didn't mention it. I ran out of time. But if you look how Yehuda responds. Yehuda doesn't say to Yosef after Yosef says this pasuk. He doesn't say, wow, God's got this master plan. We weren't aware of it, but boy, we're now seeing things that really show us that we didn't understand the big picture. Maybe we should have been more deliberate. And now we have to see how God's going to fix it. What we got all wrong. He doesn't do that. Because what can I say? What can we do? What's my righteousness? Elohim has found a place to collect the debt. What is it only about collecting a debt? It's only about punishment for the mistake. You think that's all about that only? No, that's the simple level of a child who's worried about punishment. As adults, as mature Torah adults, we're supposed to be asking ourselves, okay, this is plan going on all around us. See, because what's the first thing you see when the war, what Hamas did? Distraction. Even though we're focusing on what happened, what needs to be done, but it's a major distraction. On Simchas Torah, as people are dancing with the Sefer Torah, right? They're doing Yichud Hashem. Simchas Torah Shmini Atzeres is the day of other than Yom Kippur, really, but in its own unique way, is the day of Yichud Hashem. That's the day that we connected with the Kodesh Baruch on the level of 8, right? At the level of Lamama Teva. And what happens as we're doing it? We hear sirens. And we see blasts in the air. And it's like it's exact same thing as David HaMelech hearing a noise in the bushes, getting up and going to die. As long as he was sitting and learning, the Malach HaMavis, who was trained to take people's souls, couldn't get his. You know why? He was involved in Yichud Hashem. But history required him to go. So Kosh Baruch Hu had to bring his Yichud Hashem. He gets rewarded for a lifetime of Yichud Hashem. But for whatever reason, had to stop it there. But that's what we learned. But why tell us the story? To show us the power of Yichud Hashem to even defy death in the end. But everything else, it just distracts us. It distracts us because we see faces and we hear names and we hear statements, that this university said this professor said that, and this guy did that, and this guy's like, and we give power to everything because we get angry and upset about it. We're giving power to these things. It's all distraction. Amalek uses all this stuff, even the good stuff, even the right stuff, used to distract us as well. But Yichud Hashem means to rise above that. It doesn't mean to live in poverty. It doesn't mean, you should know, Gedolei Ador, for example, and Tzaddikim. Tzaddikim are a little bit different. That's the people who choose to live in poverty, right? But Gedolei Ador are very makpid about their presentation. Make sure they wore clean clothing and they whatever necessary. Yehuda Nasi was a perfect case in point. But it was clothing. It wasn't their life. It wasn't the reality. Yichud Hashem, you're right. That's the only pleasure there is in life. That is the real, ultimate, overwhelming, awesome pleasure. And not just that, but the pleasure you're going to have in the world to come is all the Yichud Hashem you create down in this world.
Thank you. Okay, we're looking forward to hear more about this, Rabbi. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Let's head tip to Josh Wander of Bring Them Home at Israel 365, who helped sponsor this. Thank you for joining our broadcast and checking the Miriam Project also. Geula Hour on Facebook, and that would be a lot of shiurim for Rabbi Winston's on there as well. SoundCloud too. Check Rabbi's website. Don't forget 36.org and sharnunproductions.org. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Have a great week. And we should bring the hostages home, and the soldiers should all be safe and have a good Shabbat, everybody. Good, safe Shabbat. Thank you.